When Linda died, I thought nothing could hurt more until my own son proved me wrong. That morning in Charleston, with the funeral just hours away, Ethan stood in my kitchen, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Dad, you can't bring Mom back. But Brittany's birthday only comes once a year." I swear the air left my lungs. Those words didn't just sting, they ripped through me, sharper than the cancer that had stolen Linda's life. The sunlight streaming through the window felt cruel, landing on the counter where Linda's coffee cup still sat, her faint lipstick mark frozen in time. My black tie hung limp around my neck. I'd retied it 3 times, my hands trembling, not from grief alone, but from disbelief at the man standing in front of me. The church, our church, was waiting. The same one where Linda and I had exchanged vows, where we'd been blessed by family and friends decades ago. Today, it would be packed with people coming to honor her life. And our only son, our flesh and blood, wouldn't be there. Not because he was sick, not because of an emergency. No, because he had chosen some rooftop party for his girlfriend's birthday over saying goodbye to his mother. I stared at him, desperate to find the little boy who once sprinted to greet me at the door after a long day's work, his face lighting up at the sight of me. Instead, there stood a 5-year-old man tapping away on his phone, scrolling through catering menus as if this was just another Thursday morning. "I can't just leave Brittany hanging on her special day," he said, with the casual arrogance of someone who had no idea he'd just severed something between us forever. I didn't shout. I didn't curse. My voice never came at all. The shock locked me in place, his words echoing so loudly I could barely hear him leave. And leave he did without so much as a backward glance. What Ethan didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that his careless, callous sentence would set in motion something he could never take back. Not in this lifetime. Not ever. If this story touched your heart, press 1 inch the comments. If you think it could have been handled differently, press 2. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? I've lived in Charleston my entire life. Every brick of the Dalton construction and development office downtown, every polished front porch along the Ashley River that bears our name, is a piece of me, a piece of us. The story Linda and I carved out of nothing over 40 years. Linda wasn't just my wife, she was the foundation that held everything upright. One morning she could be pouring coffee for the mayor at a charity breakfast, and that same afternoon she'd be on her knees in the backyard, hands in the dirt, planting her beloved daisies. She never cared for roses, too showy, too hollow. Daisies were honest, unpretentious, just like her. I first saw her behind the counter at a greasy diner off King Street. I was a broke young contractor with a truck held together by duct tape and stubborn hope. She believed in me before I'd even earned the right to believe in myself. We worked 16-hour days, me, on job sites, her pulling double shifts until we scraped enough together for a down payment on a tiny house in West Ashley. That was the house where we carried our newborn son, Ethan, through the front door for the first time. From that day on, Ethan was her world. She saved every report card, every crooked art project, every $2 Little League trophy. When he was old enough, I gave him a job not because he earned it, but because Linda said it would give him a start. And then we gave him everything. Private school when he couldn't keep up in public. Full tuition at Clemson. Then Duke for an MBA he never finished. His first car. His first house in Lakeview Estates. His wedding lavish, because that's what Brittany wanted. We wrote the checks. They cashed the dreams. Charleston is the kind of place where people notice. They notice who's on your arm at church, who sits with you at the country club, and, yes, who stands beside you at a funeral. A missing face doesn't just get noticed here. It gets remembered. So on the day of Linda's funeral, when people asked me, "Where's Ethan?" I told them the truth. He had other commitments. And the looks I got, confusion, pity, and something colder I couldn't quite name, cut deeper than the burial itself. Linda had defended Ethan to her last breath. When he skipped chemo appointments, she'd say, "He's busy, Rick. Young couples need space." She guarded him from my disappointment, like she once guarded him from playground bullies. But that morning, adjusting my tie for the 4th damn time, staring at her lipstick-marked coffee cup still sitting on the counter, something inside me snapped. This wasn't just grief anymore. This was the white-hot clarity that the boy we'd raised had grown into a man who believed loyalty to family was optional. And the worst part, I was the one who taught him it was. I carried that thought like a stone in my chest through the whole service. I stood alone beside her casket, listening to the pastor talk about eternal love, while the empty space where our son should have stood swallowed the light out of the room. And right there, in the shadow of my wife's coffin, I decided, if Ethan could turn his back on his mother in death, then I could damn well turn my back on the man he'd become in life. The morning after Linda's funeral, Charleston felt like a different city. I woke to the sound of gulls outside my window and the bitter scent of coffee I'd brewed out of reflex but couldn't bring myself to touch. Her absence had already restructured the air in the house, like a hurricane that sweeps through and leaves everything looking familiar yet irreversibly off-kilter. I sat at the mahogany desk in my study, the desk where I'd signed every deal that built our family's name when my phone buzzed. Ethan's name lit up the screen. I took a long breath before answering. "Morning, son." "Hey, Dad," he chirped, far too bright for the day after burying his mother. "Listen, I need to talk to you about something important." My gut tightened. "Go ahead." "So, Brittany's party last night?" "Incredible. Rooftop at the Magnolia, live jazz band, seafood from Harbor House. Perfect night. But," he chuckled sheepishly, "we might have overspent. Credit card just came in. We're looking at about 15 grand. We need to cover it immediately." I gripped the arm of my chair. $15,000? For a birthday party? "You only turned 32 once," he said, like it was the closing argument of some airtight case. "It's not a big deal for you, Dad. I know you've got it." Just yesterday, he couldn't be bothered to stand beside his mother's casket, and now the first words out of his mouth were about money. "Ethan," I said, my voice low, "I buried your mother yesterday. Do you have anything to say about that?" Silence. Then, almost impatiently, "Of course I'm sad, Dad. But life goes on. Mom wouldn't want us to mope. She'd want us to celebrate special occasions." "She wanted you at her funeral," I snapped. He sighed, the sound of a man who thought I was the unreasonable one. "So, are you going to help us or not? Brittany's stressed about the bills, and you know how she gets." "Oh." I thought about the years of checks I'd written. Asterisk $52,000 a year, 4 years of college. Asterisk $48,000 for an MBA he dropped halfway through. Asterisk $350,000 for the Lakeview Estates down payment. Asterisk $75,000 for the wedding Brittany wanted. Asterisk God knows how much for the emergency loans, European trips, new cars, boutique businesses that disappeared before the paint dried on the signage. I opened Linda's old leather-bound notebook from the desk drawer. She had recorded it all. Every dollar, every sacrifice. Asterisk anniversary dinner canceled. $5,000 for Ethan's car repairs. Asterisk postponed doctor visit. Sent money for Brittany's birthday gift. 15 years, nearly $1 million. And he still believed my wallet was an open tap. "No," I said finally. The word felt like foreign currency in my mouth. I couldn't remember the last time I'd given it to him. There was stunned silence. "No? Is the bank in trouble?" "No, Ethan, but there's something wrong with the way you think this works." His voice turned cold. "After everything this week, you're going to nickel and dime your own son? Mom would be ashamed of you." I didn't flinch. "Your mother was ashamed. You missed her funeral." The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, the quiet pressing in, the conversation replaying with every heartbeat. This wasn't just about money, it was about the rot underneath, the entitlement I had allowed to take root. That ended today. The next step wouldn't be rage, it would be strategy. The kind I used to win in business. Collect the facts, assess the damage, make a clean, decisive cut. And that's exactly what I was going to do. The morning after Ethan hung up on me, I drove into Dalton Construction and Development before the city had fully woken up. The cobblestone streets of downtown Charleston were still damp from the night air, the wrought iron balconies throwing long, thin shadows across the sidewalks. I didn't head for my corner office. I went straight to human resources. Sarah Mitchell, my HR director for over a decade, looked up from her desk. Her eyes said she already knew this wasn't a casual visit. "Morning, Mr. Dalton, you're in early." "I need Ethan's file," I told her. My tone was steady, but the words tasted like acid. Asking for that file meant admitting that my own son was now just another problem employee. Sarah didn't ask why. Minutes later, she handed me a thick folder. I took it back to my office, closed the door, and opened 8 years of willful blindness. What I saw should have had him fired years ago. Asterisk. Missed deadlines that cost the company contracts. Asterisk. Inflated expense reports, littered with charges from golf resorts and five-star restaurants. Asterisk complaints from contractors about the boss's son showing up late or vanishing mid-shift. Asterisk. Entire projects delayed because Ethan decided to leave the site early. If his name hadn't been Dalton, he'd have been escorted out long ago. But I had shielded him. I told myself he was still learning. I told myself Linda wouldn't want me to be too hard on him. All I'd really done was protect him from consequences until he believed they didn't apply to him. I closed the file and picked up the phone. Daniel, I need to make some changes to my estate plans. Daniel Morales, my attorney. My friend didn't press for details. Come in this afternoon. Bring whatever I need to see. Before lunch, I had one more stop. First National Bank. David Brooks, the branch manager, met me in his office. I want a complete list of every account, loan or credit line where I'm a guarantor for Ethan or Brittany. He hesitated. That's a long list, Rick. I want it in writing, I said flatly. And I want the process started today to remove my guarantees wherever the law allows. When I got back, Sarah was waiting at my door. Do you want me to prepare termination paperwork? I nodded. Yes, quietly, and have security ready for when it's time. That afternoon, in Daniel's Harborview office, I laid everything out. Asterisk Ethan, out of my will. Asterisk. The bulk of my assets moved into the Linda Dalton Memorial Foundation, dedicated to cancer research and scholarships for underprivileged students. Asterisk. Every insurance policy, retirement account, and investment portfolio beneficiary changed to the foundation. Asterisk. Legal notices drafted, ensuring Ethan would never control my medical or financial decisions. Daniel set his pen down. You understand this cuts him off completely. I do, I said, and I want him to understand exactly why. By the time I left, the paperwork was in motion. Within weeks, the foundation would be real. Stepping into the salt-tinged evening air, I felt something I hadn't felt since Linda's last good day clarity. This wasn't spite. This wasn't revenge. This was setting the record straight. And I was only getting started. 2 mornings later, I arrived at Dalton Construction and Development before the sun cleared the horizon. The streets were empty, the air thick with that salty Charleston dampness, and the building stood in the pale light like a fortress. Inside, it was silent except for the low hum of the HVAC and the faint scent of fresh coffee drifting from the break room. I stopped in the lobby, in front of the management wall. Ethan's framed photo looked polished, tailored suit, crisp smile, the picture of a competent executive. I'd bought that suit, paid for the watch peeking out from under his cuff. And now, staring at it, all I saw was arrogance bought and paid for with my own hand. By 8:45, Sarah Mitchell was in my office with a neat stack of papers. Termination documents, she said softly. Security's on standby. At 9:30, the familiar sound of Ethan's laugh carried in from the lobby. 15 minutes late. Again, I could hear him joking with the receptionist about still recovering from Brittany's rooftop birthday party. I pressed the intercom. Ethan, my office. Now. Sure, Dad, let me grab a coffee first, he called back. Now, Ethan. The pause told me he'd caught the change in my voice. His footsteps were heavier than usual as he came in and stopped dead when he saw Sarah seated across from my desk, a pen in her hand. What's this? His smile twitched. I didn't rise. Ethan, your employment here is terminated effective immediately. He gave a short, incredulous laugh. You're joking. I slid the papers toward him. Review and sign where indicated. He scanned the first page, the color draining from his face. Dad, come on. This is the family business. This is my business, I said evenly. Your position is being eliminated for performance and conduct issues. His eyes darted to Sarah, then back to me. This is about the funeral, isn't it? I told you, this is about 8 years of missed deadlines, inflated expenses, and damaged client relationships. Any other employee would have been gone years ago. His mask cracked. Mom would never let you do this. She wanted you to support me. I pressed the discreet button under my desk. Mike from security appeared almost instantly. This is a business decision, I told Ethan, my voice like glass. Mike stepped inside the doorway. Heads were starting to appear in the hallway. Ethan's jaw tightened, the humiliation sinking in. Dad, please. Number. He gathered a few things from his desk, a framed photo of Brittany, a mug from the company's 25th anniversary, and left under Mike's escort. I walked straight to the lobby, took his picture down from the management wall, and slid it into my desk drawer face down. The empty space looked cleaner. It stayed clean for less than an hour. The sharp click of designer heels cut across the marble lobby. Brittany burst in, hair perfectly set, lipstick flawless, and Ethan trailing behind her like a man who knew better but had no control. She didn't wait for an invitation. How dare you humiliate Kyle like this? She snapped, stabbing a finger toward me like she was cross-examining a hostile witness. This is a private workplace, I said evenly. You need to leave. Her voice climbed. We have bills to pay, a lifestyle to maintain. This company belongs to Ethan, too. Ethan was an at-will employee. He's entitled to nothing. Her words turned into a public performance, pitched loud enough for everyone within earshot. Linda would be ashamed of you. You're having some kind of breakdown. Enough, Ethan muttered. But she plowed on, threatening lawsuits for our share of my estate. She even called me by another name before correcting herself, and kept ranting about how they'd fight me. I pressed the button again. Mike reappeared, this time with backup. Brittany's voice bounced off the marble as they walked her out, her threats thinning into the hallway. When the door closed, Ethan lingered in the doorway, shoulders stiff. I'm all the family you have left, he said quietly, less like a plea and more like a warning. I looked at him for a long moment. Number? You're just someone who used to be my son. Charleston is a city with a long memory and a short fuse for scandal. Word of Ethan's absence from Linda's funeral didn't just spread, it detonated. It started quietly, over bourbon in the Magnolia Ridge Country Club lounge. Michael Grant, the club president, leaned in with the kind of polite curiosity Charleston uses before delivering a death sentence. Where was your boy on Sunday? I didn't lower my voice. He chose his wife's birthday party instead. The flicker of disbelief on Michael's face was the same I'd seen at the church. By the following week, the story had slipped into every bridge club, every Sunday brunch, every golf foursome. In Charleston, you don't need to shout. You just let the silence form around someone until they're gasping for air. The cracks began in Brittany's world first. Her yoga instructor at Riverbend Studio politely suggested she find another studio. We prefer members who uphold family values. Ethan's lunch reservation at the club was suddenly unavailable indefinitely. Their table at Romano's? Magically booked every night. Charleston's polite society doesn't slam doors, it simply stops opening them. Business was no gentler. A networking lunch Ethan had scheduled with the Chamber of Commerce evaporated without explanation. Job interviews were postponed until the calls stopped coming altogether. No one wanted to sit across a table from the man who had skipped his own mother's funeral. Meanwhile, I was tightening the financial vice. At First National Bank, David Brooks slid a folder toward me. Here's every account and loan you've guaranteed. I didn't hesitate. I signed withdrawal notices for every single one. All above board 30 days notice, documented in black and white. At 30 days, the late notices began. At 60, the bank moved to foreclosure. The morning of the auction, I parked across from the county courthouse. The crowd was modest but attentive. Charleston loves a public unraveling. The auctioneer's voice rang out, listing the details of 1470 Lakeview Drive, the 4-bedroom colonial where Ethan had once boasted about hosting Christmas. A woman in a navy suit opened the bidding. Ethan moved toward her, but security stepped in. When Daniel Morales arrived beside me, nodding toward her, I watched Ethan's expression change. That's Dad's lawyer, I heard him mutter to Brittany. The bidding was brisk. The final hammer price matched the mortgage balance exactly. Sold to Mitchell Holdings, LLC, Sarah Mitchell's new company. My proxy. Brittany's voice cracked across the courtyard. This is our home! It bounced off the courthouse stone, but the gavel had already sealed their eviction. Ethan's eyes met mine. There was no anger there, only the slow, sinking realization that I'd been playing a longer, colder game than he could have imagined. 2 weeks later, a moving truck squatted in their driveway, far too small to carry the life they'd built on my dime. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. Former friends kept walking. No one came to help. That night, Brittany delivered her verdict. I didn't marry you for this. Fix it or I'm gone. By the weekend, she was gone back in the arms of an old flame who owned a chain of seafood restaurants up the coast. For the first time in his life, Ethan was truly alone, and that's when I heard the knock at my door. It was a raw November evening when I saw the shape on my front porch. Through the beveled glass, Ethan stood there, motionless, his hand hovering over the doorbell like he was afraid of what waited on the other side. For a full minute he didn't move. Then, finally, the chime rang a sound that once meant family had come home. I opened the door but didn't step aside. Ethan looked diminished. His beard was uneven, his shirt wrinkled, jeans worn thin at the knees. He'd lost weight, but not in a way that spoke of discipline. This was the look of someone worn down by life and bad choices. "Dad," he began, his voice rough. I know I screwed up. I'm not the same person I was." I let the silence stretch, forcing him to fill it. He spilled everything: how he was living in a cramped studio above a laundromat, working graveyard shifts at a gas station for minimum wage. How Brittany had left, taking half the furniture with her. How he'd finally realized what really mattered. "I want to be the son Mom wanted me to be," he said, his eyes flicking past me toward the warm light of the living room. "We can start over." I didn't move. "When is your mother's birthday?" He blinked. June 15th? "The 9th of August," I corrected. "What was her favorite flower?" He hesitated. "Roses?" "Daisies," I said evenly. "She loved daisies. Always." His expression tightened. The mask of humility cracked, and the frustration bled through. "Dad, this is ridiculous. Just tell me what you want me to say." And there it was, the same Ethan. It didn't take long for the real reason he was here to surface. "I'm behind on rent. The power company's about to shut me off. I just need a little help to get back on my feet. You still see me as a checkbook," I said quietly. "No, I turned away, walked into the living room, and came back with a small leather-bound book, Linda's journal. Flipping to a page I knew too well, I read aloud. "I'm worried Ethan only loves our money. What if we've raised a child who can't love?" He froze. "She wrote that in her last months," I said. "She died knowing what you'd become. She changed her will before she passed. You were left nothing because she knew you'd waste it." The softness drained from his face completely. "I'll contest the will. I'll tell the court you're not in your right mind. You can't just erase me." "You already erased yourself," I said. His eyes narrowed to slits. "I hope you die alone in this house." I stepped back and closed the door with a quiet click. For several minutes he pounded on it, his voice rising with anger and desperation, but I didn't answer. I walked into the kitchen, set the kettle on the stove, and waited for the water to boil. By the time the whistle blew, his car was gone. I carried my tea into the den and settled into Linda's favorite chair, the journal still resting in my lap. For the first time since she died, the weight on my chest eased. It was over. A year passed. Charleston's spring sunlight fell warm and clean across Riverside Cemetery as I walked the familiar path toward Linda's grave. In my hand, a bundle of fresh daisies, bright, unpretentious, just as she'd loved them. Kneeling beside the polished granite, I brushed away a few oak leaves and set the flowers gently at its base. "The foundation's thriving, Linda," I said softly. 20 scholarships this year, 200,000 to cancer research, and the community center dedication is set for your birthday. I stayed there for a while, telling her about the people we'd helped, students who thought college was out of reach, single mothers rebuilding their lives, families who'd never set foot in a place like Magnolia Ridge, now sitting at tables where they belonged. When I finally stood and walked back to my truck, I didn't turn toward home. Instead, I pulled into the parking lot of the Morning Glory Diner on Meeting Street. Ethan was behind the counter, wearing a faded polo with the diner's logo, a towel tucked into his belt. He was refilling a coffee pot when he saw me. For a split second, his face shifted: shock, shame, and something quieter. "Hi, Dad," he said, setting the pot down. His voice was careful. "I'm well," I answered. He nodded slowly. "I know sorry doesn't fix anything." "No," I agreed. "It doesn't." He swallowed hard. "I get it now, what I lost. It was never about the money, was it? You and Mom just wanted me to love you, not your wallet." "Your mother wanted that more than anything," I said. "She would have fought for it." His eyes held steady this time, no darting, no rehearsed lines. "Is there a way back?" "I don't know," I told him truthfully. "Maybe, But it won't come from words, only actions. For a moment we stood in the low hum of the diner, the sound of plates clinking in the background. The air between us wasn't warm, but it wasn't poisoned anymore either, just heavy with what might still be possible. That evening, back at home, I trimmed the rose bushes Linda had planted, the sunset spilling gold over the garden. Grace gentle, kind, understanding called to confirm our weekend plans. For the first time since Linda's passing, I felt something I could name without hesitation: peace. I had honored my wife's memory. Justice had been done. And whatever happened next with Ethan, that was his to earn.